Welcome to the Bridge Summit. This is day 2. I'm Steve Wright, your host and moderator for this next session. I'm delighted to be joined by Kadir, Ider and Sarah Rudge. I'll let them introduce themselves in the moment. My name is Steve Wright and I'm from PICCASO. For those of you who don't know what PICCASO means, it stands for Privacy InfoSec Culture, Change, Awareness, Strategy and Operations. And we are a not-for-profit organization that's dedicated to driving excellence in privacy and security by fostering collaboration, innovation and best practice. And we do this through thought leadership, with an advisory board and through industry engagement. And we just help organizations navigate this complex area and the regulations around the world. We help build robust governance frameworks and really just help shape the future of data protection and privacy. So please join us by connecting with me or with the link that will be at the end of today's session. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Kadir. Kadir, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and then I'll introduce the topic?
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the nice intro. My name is Kadir. I am living and working in Germany for Turkey's largest e-commerce company. And I'm in data protection prior to the inception of the GDPR even. I've been a consultant and I've been basically developing into the area of privacy tech, looking really into the application of privacy, baking in privacy into technology. I live privacy even outside of work. Privacy is very important for me.
Yes.
Protecting humans' privacy is something that I really love to do. Makes me almost feel like a doctor, kind of. A digital
Very good.
doctor. Yeah,
Digital,
that's basically me in a nutshell.
Thank you, Kadir. And Sarah.
Thanks very much, Steve. Thanks for inviting me along today. It's really nice to be able to spend a bit of time talking to you all. So a little bit about me then. So my name's Sarah Rudge, and I have been working in data protection for about 13 years now. My background is actually in the public sector in the UK civil service, mainly sort of in the education space, but then I moved to the private sector to work with a company called Zego about 2.5 years ago. And that has seen sort of a really different approach to data privacy and data protection and how we work with security. So over the course of my career, it's been a real eye-opener moving over into the private sector. You might not have heard of Zego because we are quite a sort of specialist motor insurer. We have about 250 staff, and I'm mentioning that because that sort of does link into some of the things that I'm sure we'll be talking about today. But our mission is to reward good drivers through combining tech with telematics data. So telematics data is another good one when we're talking about privacy. So data is very much at the heart of what we do, when I sort of say about, I suppose, not necessarily knowing Zego, the types of drivers that we insure are people that will be using their vehicles for their work. So couriers, delivery drivers, taxi drivers. But we've also recently moved into personal car insurance as well. So we've seen the market widen and our customer base widen. And obviously that does also have implications for our approach to privacy. Obviously still protecting people's data, but it's a new group of people that we're looking after now. So yeah, we have to take all of that into account.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. So 2 very good case studies that we've got here. And just for the audience, my day job is actually I'm a data protection officer. I'm at a financial services organization here in London at the moment, but I've worked for Bank of England, Unilever, and some other large retailers as well. So I think the panel you've got today is absolutely perfect. With Kadir from e-commerce and Sarah with her real case studies around actually dealing with customer information, insurance information. So this is great, because today we're talking about the evolution of the DPO, and over the last 15 years I have seen it evolve quite considerably. I've just come out of a meeting about our AI governance that we're putting in place, for example. So things are constantly moving, and I think in small, large, tech-driven organizations that we're all working in now, there are huge amounts of data. In fact, data is at the center of everything that we do. And really what we've seen, obviously, since you mentioned, Kadir, about GDPR, that four-letter acronym that, you know, we've been talking about for 8 years now, enforcement has become stricter. Data flows have become more global with the onset of cloud facilities, and now AI is the next conundrum. DPOs have continuously had to improve our compliance position, but also move with the times and those demands. So I suppose the first question is, in your opinion, I'll start with you, Kadir, how has the role of the DPO in your organization evolved just in the last 2 years alone?
I mean, I think what has really changed or evolved is looking back at how the idea of the DPO was. DPO as a consultant, which means also the DPO had to figure out what means, for instance, data deletion request, right? And I think everything technical is way more complex when it hits the real world, right? And I think how the DPO role has evolved is it kind of shifted from this kind of compliance focus, checking off the list. You have to do this and that, more to a very strategic, integrated approach where the DPO is more involved, or at least let's call it the DPO team in general is more involved in really, I like the term, baking in privacy into the technology, into the processes, and into the minds of the employees.
Yes, very good. Yeah, no, that's, and just to take on that question then, Sarah, what in your world, where you've come from, you know, public sector to private organizations. So what would you say in the last 2 years since you joined has been the biggest change that you've had to adapt to as an individual, as a DPO? You know, you've been doing this for 13 years, and then suddenly you've gone out of this environment into a very different environment. So what would you say is the biggest change that you've had to adapt to?
It is quite funny, because actually the top of my list in terms of thinking about this, my first comment was about a shift from compliance, very much so. So that's actually really quite interesting to see that Kadir, you're saying exactly the same thing. So yeah, there's been a definite shift from talking about data protection from a compliance perspective, which is, I think, very traditionally seen by businesses as a barrier. And sort of using the regulatory stick to sort of say you've got to do this because regulation says so. So we've definitely moved away from that, and it's much more now about being embedded in the business, about, you know, talking about things from a customer and a stakeholder point of view as well, because obviously customers are crucial to Zego, but there are the stakeholders, the wider stakeholders, and they also need to have confidence that we're actually looking after data as we should be. So I think sort of understanding that and being able to talk about how that actually drives and enables business growth is really key. So part of, I think that the biggest change is about a change in how we approach privacy and data protection. And it's about that developing, I think, a privacy culture. I think there's also been a move away from that formulaic sort of mechanistic tick box type approach, which also you mentioned, Kadir. So I'm finding now that a lot of the thing, I'm not relying on those tools anymore. I'm not relying on those, you know, those spreadsheets and things like that. It's much more around what we can find out through engaging with the business, and that privacy and security by design sort of being embedded. And there's a lot of new tools out there now, and I'm not pushing anything at all, but I've just, there's a couple of things that I've found that using the Bravado tool and also something called Ice Panel, which our architects use, has been amazing for sort of helping me understand that privacy landscape. And these are sort of things that we'd never sort of talked about using before. You know, you've got your standard toolkit. So I think there's been a shift away from that and looking at what other things are out there to give us that picture, that sort of richer picture of how the data is used. And as you've already said as well, Kadir, that's not a straightforward thing now. I know we'll talk about that later, I'm sure, but yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I think that's really good points, and I think you've both beautifully echoed where we've kind of evolved, especially since GDPR went live, or there was a rush to make sure we were all compliant. And then post that, the last 6 years, we've been adapting, evolving. And I think that's really good. I was wondering if, Kadir, you had an example. I mean, you're in an e-commerce that's very, customer focused, very absolutely 100% uptime or 99.9% uptime, otherwise it costs money. So any initiatives, any reasons to slow that business down or to slow that delivery down is kind of met with rather fraught conversations, I've no doubt. So how would you say over the last couple of years your approach to those conversations with the business has evolved?
I think we try to have a more holistic approach. Again, as I said, I have an inherent desire to protect privacy, yet I see myself as a business enabler, right?
Okay.
Because for everyone in privacy knows, the moment the data protection team rings your doorbell, everyone is scared. And if you change that mindset, and you can change that mindset by really talking the same language. Again, that's why I, for instance, focused over the past years in privacy tech. I actually went, nice cat, Sarah. I focused on understanding and really learning, let me say, technological terminologies, and not leaving, let's say, machine learning as a buzzword, but really understanding the statistics behind this. So in fact, actually, what happened, I dropped out of university and I actually went and signed up for another degree where I really learned to code and learned the hardcore programming, and to really understand also what are these guys doing, because I already had a privacy background, and it really helped me to build a bridge to these people. Once I built that bridge, what we also do is we kind of, in our company, we gamify a little bit data protection.
Yes.
What you can see, for instance, the result is see in the background here, Privacy Hero. We do these campaigns. We offer ad hoc trainings to our teams. We do also global trainings and webinars in person and online. We have the luxury also to translate that into the various languages, because we operate obviously in multiple countries. And people can collect coins. People can trade them also internally for goodies. I don't know if you might have seen, actually, last week or 2 weeks ago, we even published, one of our colleagues from the privacy team in Turkey published some pictures on LinkedIn. We give out those camera, what are they called? The blockers,
yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
With the privacy logo on it.
Nice.
And we try to be available on every level, because once you do that, people will automatically, in the very early stage of product development, and in e-commerce, I tell you this, you go on holiday for a week, you come back, and the entire business looks different. But then if people remember you, they will by default already, or by nature, add you to the product development. And that's how we make sure that our products are privacy compliant.
That is fantastic examples. Thanks, Kadir. That are really good. I think giveaways, are absolute winner with people. Everyone loves a freebie. So Sarah, how do you build those effective partnerships between business and technology? Because you've got two very different stakeholders here. So how do you do that in your organization?
I think sometimes as well, you sort of look at these and think there is perhaps a payoff, but I don't think there necessarily has to be. And I think that, as Kadir sort of explained there are ways to do this. I think without sort of giving a very specific example, and I'm sure a lot of people will be able to associate with this, the biggest challenge has been around the rapid growth around AI, and especially working in a tech business, because there's obviously a lot out there, very easily accessible. But we also have very fantastic creative talent at Zego who really want to innovate. So they want to try out these new tools. But equally, we need to make sure that we know what's going on with our data, and we need to make sure it's protected. So that's probably one of the biggest challenges, actually, that we're sort of facing, because we still need to look at what those checks and balances are. But we've had to sort of redefine how we do that, I think, and a way without sort of stifling innovation. So taking a sort of very proportionate and pragmatic approach to things, but it's about how we communicate with each other. We have had to sort of take on more work within our team and a different type of work within the team. But we've determined that this is actually the best use of our time now. It is that communication. And it's just like you sort of said, Kadir, about getting people to know who you are and come and speak to you. So it's all done very collaboratively now. And we want people to sort of start to, we want to put people in a position that we work with to start to think about these things themselves. And I've already mentioned sort of privacy by design, but I think that is crucial. But we need to sort of enable a way to move more now to a self-serve model, because we're having to pause a few other things and, deprioritize a few things. But the other thing is it's about sort of working across teams. So DP and IS, for example, we don't sit on our own. We work really closely, or be them in a different sort of part of the business, with the IT ops team, with our systems engineers team as well. We work with the telematics team. So, we work on sort of the models that we're developing, I suppose, in terms of making sure that privacy by design is there, but it is done very collaboratively. We've got to listen to each other, and we talk about it very much as an enabler, and we use those examples to illustrate how it's an enabler. And I've also found giving some examples of where we haven't done this in the past, where we haven't worked collaboratively, sort of is a good illustration of where things do go wrong, and the impact of that is actually a lot more costly than people sort of appreciate. So better to work with us early on, and talk to us, engage with us, tell us what your problems are. We can sort that out. We can help you. Basically, it's very supportive.
That's really come across from both of you, and I know from my own environment here, it's very similar. That collaborative approach and sort of getting in there early. I wonder if, Kadir, you could just give us a little bit of insight of, we've always got to build that defensible position should, heaven forbid, that data breach incident happen, and then, regulators knocking on the door. So what processes or kind of tools, not mentioning any particular tools, but what processes and techniques have you deployed in your e-commerce organization to kind of address some of those things? And yes, we've moved away from compliance tick box, but we still have to demonstrate how we've made some recommendations or what the risks are. So how are you doing that?
So we, for instance, collaborate very closely with the CEO office.
Okay.
What does that mean? Is we look into what are, to gain strategic insights, to also understand, for instance, what are our, let's say, market focuses, what is our risk appetite for specific business activities. We know, obviously, we have the mapping. As a privacy team, I think the luxury is you can work with all the teams in all the domains. And we do know, obviously, because we have a records of processing activities with, we do use and scan our code repositories. We know we have an integrated and automated way of scoring, do a risk scoring. We basically bring all these informations together. And we also, what we do is we monitor GDPR trends. So we extract, actually, for the past years already, and that's going beyond the company I'm working in. We've been extracting GDPR fines. We look into the historical trends, but not only to do, let's say, the descriptive, but then also to predictive activities or analytics, right?
Fantastic.
We try to bring our core business insights, and then the broader data protection trends and advancements, and try to foresee already maybe which areas in our business need way more attention. That's our proactive approach. And then when you break it down to a very specific, let's say, processing activity, we do have the processing activities. We revisit those activities and check with our colleagues. It's all about the communication, right? And that's how we can basically work proactively with the teams.
That's really good. And I mean, that's very similar, but was anything you want to build on that, Sarah?
Again, sort of very, very much in agreement. We take a risk-based approach, so we use various sources of information to enable us to do that effectively. We're, like I said, I've been with the business for 2.5 years, and prior to that was an outsourced DPO function. So you know, so when I joined, it was almost a bit like starting from scratch in a sense, which has been great because we've all been able to work together to get to where we need to be. So yeah, understanding risk is actually fundamental, I think, and that obviously then goes into obviously other parts of privacy, your technical and your organizational controls and things like that. So it gives you that overall view. So risk isn't just a risk manager or a particular, you know, group of people that deal with risk. It's very fundamental to what we do. And I've already sort of used the term sort of proportionate and pragmatic. That very much applies. And I think one of the things that we do that I hadn't experienced before, but I think really works well, and it does go back to that whole thing about communicating with people, is about enabling people to actually contact us, work with us, and communicate with us via whatever mechanism suits them. We don't have a single form. We don't have a single route into the team. We use Slack. We have a Jira board for people that prefer things a bit more structured. And then what we do is we will work with that, and we will then, for accountability purposes, we feed that into our own system. So we keep a record of that, but we don't put that sort of burden, I suppose, on the business. And then that enables us to monitor what we're doing, look at where that we're spending our time. And that's why, you know, even though we know we can feel that the whole sort of reviews, sort of SaaS reviews, things like that for AI tools and things, we know that's happening, but we've actually got the evidence to support us there. And it helps us then look at, you balance that against what your risks are, and then you can then determine, okay, we need to shift our priorities, or we need to move in this direction at the moment. So it is about adaptability and flexibility, definitely, but using evidence to support that and enable good decision making, I think. And you do need to keep check on it. It's not, you know, we're doing this for 2 months, say, for example. You can't do that. You need to keep refreshing on it on a regular basis because things change that quickly.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we've discussed a little bit about the evolution, and you know, just before we move on to AI, just an interlude. What would you say were the 3 key skills needed to be an effective DPO in today's society? You know, because we are, you know, we've got our home lives intermingled with our working lives now. You know, I'm doing PICCASO stuff in the evenings. I'm doing, you know, work in the daytime, work in the evenings, you know, and everything, looking after my kids, you know, everything's become integrated, and that is a trend that we're seeing. So what would you say are kind of 2 or 3 of the key skills that are needed to be a really effective DPO, especially with the upcoming AI changes? Kadir, what's your...
I think really in a nutshell, 1, be on top of your game in terms of the legal requirements. 2, always keep up with the technology and the technological developments. And 3, I think always keep that, I think, MVP, so minimum viable product thinking in mind. Also, as Sarah mentioned, pragmatic work, right?
Yes,
it's very
pragmatism.
That pragmatism goes hand in hand with MVP.
It does,
I think these 3 things, and I would say that to complete that package is being approachable. That's more like a characteristic aspect. It's a nice blend of being successful as a DPO.
That is brilliant. Do you want to add, Sarah? What are your?
It's hard to add to that. That was like
that was pretty good, wasn't it? You got it.
And I like the MVP bit. Definitely, I agree with that. I agree wholeheartedly with everything that Kadir said. I suppose the only one thing I would sort of say is I think it can be really challenging depending on the environment you're working in, being a
Mhm.
DPO is not a straightforward role. When you're talking, nothing is ever clear cut. So there's always, nuances and different ways to look at things and interpret things, and that includes the law and the changes that might be there at the moment, and the changes that are coming. I think what you can't do as a DPO is beat yourself up about struggling to keep on top of everything. There is a lot of change in the regulatory landscape. There's a lot of change in the technology landscape, and you can't be expected to know everything. So don't be too hard on yourself. And that's why, again, it's about, as Kadir sort of said, from a personality perspective, first of all, I think you do need to have a genuine interest and love of data protection. Not everybody does. And no matter how hard I try
Hard to believe.
people, I know. But yeah,
How could you
you've got
not
to
love
have
it?
that sort of open approach and be willing to talk to people and have some really good debates actually about this, because that's the thing. Data protection will mean different things to different people. And, so that MVP is crucial, but also, take it in your stride, be committed, be dedicated, but you can't know everything. So, that's why it's important to work with other people.
I think that's really, really good. And I know we're running out of time, but really good things. I like what you both said. Really good. You've got to know the legal, you've got to know the technology. That's hard to stay ahead of that, and the willingness. I think the other thing which you're doing without even realizing, and that's diplomacy. Because there's a heavy degree of kind of, you can't just go in and go no. You have to be empathetic and listening to what they're saying, what they want to achieve, what the business objectives. And I do like the MVP, Kadir. I think it should be minimal viable
Product.
more than product, but it should be pragmatic. I think we should take product out and minimum viable pragmatism or something like that. That could be our new mantra. But I love those. So we've got the last few minutes, and I just wanted to obviously ask about the one that's keeping us not up at night, because it's evolving at such breakneck speed, but it's certainly something which, of all my peer group, I've noticed a lot of people are adding on AI ethics officer and data protection, or chief privacy officer and ethics. And so it feels like we're being dragged, not unwillingly, but we're being sort of poured into that tide, with the tide. But what's your thoughts on that? And is that something that we want to embrace as data protection officers, or are we going to just go, nope, sorry, not in my remit? Thoughts, Sarah? You start.
Thanks. I definitely not. No, it's not in my remit. I think that's the sort of, from what we just said in response to the last question, we won't get very far if we do that. I think it's a very tricky one, and I think it's, again, from the perspective as a DPO, it's understanding what those challenges are and how you can try to address them. And actually, sort of, I'm coming at this from a different angle. I think one of the biggest challenges, I suppose in insurance, we've got a lot of issues, with the improvements in deep fake technology through AI. Identity theft and fraud related risks, for example, are really big. But then, and how that data can be used as well. This is another challenge, I think. But I think it's becoming harder and more difficult to, effectively articulate what is happening with a person's data to them. And I think AI makes that increasingly harder. And I think that's one of the big things that I'm sort of thinking about. How can I tell people what we're doing with their data? Because transparency is so crucial to enable that business growth. And data is being spread, as we know, across tools, across services, geographical locations, devices. And that's actually really hard, I think, to explain in a clearly understandable way, which is obviously what we have a legal obligation to do. So I think that, and then, of course, you've got your devices as well, which themselves
Sarah,
present other problems.
No. Thank you. I'm looking at that clock, thinking we're going to get cut off any second now. We're down to the last minute. So I just, so Kadir, just kind of, what would you say? We've been on a journey. what would you be looking out for? What would you be advising if you were whispering into an up and coming DPO? Would you say keep your eyes out on? What would be one or two things or tips that you might give that DPO?
Let me take that AI thought and as a concrete example. I think focus on AI and machine learning in stages. Understand what the business is doing with it.
Yep.
And then try to integrate that into your data protection services that you provide. That's what we also do already. We've been collecting, let's say, data over the past years to train our own models.
Yep.
Keep it in academia, and the blend will make it.
Thank you very much. Listen, Sarah, Kadir, we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.